So I thought I'd call it MTD for that game on, because it really is now time to get going. What a spectacularly well-timed course. John could not possibly have known when HMRC were going to open the pilot, because HMRC didn't know when they were going to open the pilot. And therefore, managing to time this just as the pilot is going live and starting to crank up is absolutely fabulous, because now is the time you can actually, instead of thinking about it, you can actually go back to the office and do this. So I'll be giving you the lowdown on exactly what you have to do in technical terms. And I'll be littering that with my own experience, my own practice. So for those who don't know me, as well as being a lecturer and a writer on all things tax, I also have a practice in Gloucestershire, which I am currently expanding. So about 15 years ago, I downsized my practice because I had such a lot of lecturing work, and I now have 2 grown-up children who both want to work in my practice, so I thought I'd better just get some more clients so that I can afford to pay them for it. And so my practice is growing, so I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing for some of our clients, and indeed the client that I went to see yesterday afternoon, who is going to be quite interesting, because not only do they not have internet or email or a computer, but they also don't have a mobile phone either. So I'll tell you a little bit about how actually we're going to work with cloud-based software to bring them on, because they will certainly be mandated into MTD for VAT, because they're a pub turning over more than the VAT threshold. So be interesting. Okay, John talked a little bit about this. Let's just get a bit of a sense of perspective on why we're where we are. The original plan was to bring income tax on board first, but MTD is much, much bigger than a single tax. It is a complete revolution of the way tax is administered for the vast majority of taxpayers in this country, and indeed for HMRC, in that they have all brand new computer systems, a physical brand new computer, but all brand new computer systems. I think some of your puzzlement will be resolved if you keep remembering that there's a new computer called the MTD computer. It's a bit more complicated than that. And then there's the old computers. So while you're doing old stuff, SA and stuff like that, you're on the old system. When you're doing MTD, you're on the new system. So you will need to be doing both for quite a while yet, probably about 5 years. So you will have 2 lots of sign-ons. One when you're doing MTD stuff and one when you're doing SA. So keep that in mind. Why VAT? Well, it was made very, very clear after the general election fiasco last year. It was made very clear to senior ministers that there were enough backbenchers that were going to actually vote against MTD for income tax to actually cause the finance bill to fail. And that has never happened. Never ever has a finance bill actually been lost in the Commons. We can't lose a finance bill in the Lords, because when in the 1920s, when it looked as if they were going to, they changed the law so that the Lords cannot vote down a finance bill. But to lose a finance bill in the Commons just after a complete bollocks of a general election would have been really, really politically very serious. So they had another think. And they decided that they could probably, without looking like they were doing a U-turn, they could probably swing it like this. Most of the respondents to the consultation document, that's you guys, because you did, in your thousands, all said, don't do this, it's insane. Lots of our clients haven't got computers or mobile phones. If you just did it for people who are VAT registered, at least they have to do quarterly returns and they have to have books and records as opposed to a pile of bits of paper. And so that would actually work. And some of you and some of your clients actually wrote to MPs, which is why MPs were actually quite prepared to go against the government and vote it down. So they had a little thing, and then they announced that they had been listening to us. No, they hadn't. No. It just made it look a bit less like a U-turn. So they said, okay, we hear what you say. We're just going to do it for VAT registered businesses. In fact, we will go further. We will only do it for VAT. So not only did they give way on the who, they gave way on the what. So you're filing VAT returns, you're predominantly filing them online, and you're filing them predominantly quarterly. What will you do under MTD? You will file your VAT returns online and predominantly quarterly. So what's not to like? Now, as you'll see, there's a little bit more to it than that, but really, this is the sort of palatable, this is the backdoor entrance of MTD. And I know one of my experiences over the last few weeks has been people saying to me, if it's so not different, why the flipping heck are we doing it? And the answer is because this is the only way they could get MTD off the ground. Don't see this as an end in itself. It is a means to quarterly reporting for income tax. But it's a soft landing, if you like, or a soft introduction. So that's why we're doing it. But yeah, it isn't actually too scary because they have so backpedaled all the way through. So mandating MTD will only apply next year to VAT, as you know. It will only apply to people who are mandatorily registered over the £85,000 threshold. That's been frozen till 2020, and on Monday we heard it will be frozen through till 2022, while the government decides which side of the fence it's on with a potential slash to the VAT threshold. Now, there's very, very wide and strongly held views each way on that, so let's not worry about that for now. Let's just focus on this £85,000. It comes in April 19, and it is for your first VAT period starting on or after that date. So if you're a June stagger group, then you're in on the 1st of April. If you're a July stagger group, you're in on the 1st of May. Okay, so that's when it comes in. Let's just get one thing out of the way, and I'll repeat a couple of questions I've had on courses. Rebecca, I've got a dentist and they turn over about £185,000. I interrupt. And are they VAT registered? Knowing dentists. No. So your question was? Because their question was going to be, they turn over more than 85,000, do they have to do MTD for VAT? Wrong. If you don't do VAT, then you don't do VAT. You also don't do MTD for VAT. So, okay, let's get all of that out of the way. So let's have a look now in the next sort of 20 minutes or so at timing, mandation, what records you have to keep, the return itself, and then we'll go into some of the practical issues. I'm very, very happy to take questions around, my client uses this, and we do that, and will that be compliant? Very, very happy to take those sorts of questions, so that, because everybody will have clients in similar situations, so very happy to talk directly about your personal experience in your practice. So what do you have to do? You have to keep digital records, and you have to submit your returns direct from software. However, direct from software will include spreadsheets, as we now know. Manual entries are not permitted, but I need to explain that so you understand where manual stops and where IT comes in. Okay, mandatory IT comes in. And it's not only where, but it's also when, because we've got a staging. At the moment, around 85% of returns are submitted by businesses logging on to HMRC and going into the VAT 100 and typing the entries. That will no longer be permitted. I originally thought that HMRC were actually going to take down the VAT 100 for anyone over the VAT threshold. It turns out that that's probably a bit too complicated, and therefore VAT 100 will still be there, because of course if you're under the VAT limit, you can still carry on filing the same way. And the old VAT system, and remember that would be old VAT on a stinky old computer in a cellar somewhere, emitting smoke occasionally. Yeah, it's only just past punch cards if you're as old as me. So in that case, they'll need to keep that going for the non-mandatory registered, at least for, well, quite some time probably. Why are large businesses submitting their VAT returns by typing into a form on HMRC's computer? And lots of us know the answer to that. It's because their VAT returns are pretty damn complicated, and it takes them lots and lots of bits of data to get it all together, and then they actually then have no way of submitting that electronically. They're not simple like my clients who can use QuickBooks or Free Agent or Sage or, right, I'm doing a name check for them all at the moment, okay? So Sage, I'll do the big five: Sage, QuickBooks Cashflow, Free Agent, Zero, thank you. Yeah, that'll do, but you know, there are loads and loads of products. So my clients use that, lots of big companies can't. I taught basic VAT courses for the ICAW for many, many, many years. And most of the delegates I had were from very, very, very large groups. And the reason they were coming on VAT courses is because they'd got something wrong. And that they had massively complex VAT affairs and they needed to get a handle on what it is they were not getting right. So a year ago, I talked, I'm one of the reasons I'm so embedded in this MTD stuff is, let me go back to winter 15. George Osborne announced the death of the tax return in March 15. And in December 15, pre-budget report, David Gauke announced making tax digital. Now, I was already aware of the project because I'd had some exposure to it as part of a group that I'm on called the Admin Burdens Advisory Group, which is a group that advises HMRC on the burdens that they put on business that are counterproductive. Quite a high-level group, and I'd seen a new project called Making Tax Easier. And that was in about the June. And I loved it. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. And I stuck my nose in, as I do, sticky beak, and said, oh, I think this is really interesting. I'd love to get involved. Can I be on a working group? Can I get involved in it? And that was actually the start of Making Tax Digital. At no time until the December announcement was it indicated that it would be mandatory. It was all going to be completely optional for everyone who liked computers and was a bit IT whizzy. And then suddenly it became mandatory and I was fuming. And I tweeted to that effect frequently. And I got phoned up at home by a senior person from HMRC who I'd never met and had never met me to ask me not to tweet about it anymore. If I couldn't say anything nice, would I not say anything? And I'm afraid he caught me on a bit of a difficult day, and I gave him both barrels down the phone, and I reloaded and gave him 2 more for good measure. And said things like, well, the trouble is with you lot, you've got no flaming idea what goes on in small businesses. You haven't met my clients and you wouldn't want to. And much more to that effect. And at the end of it, he said, I think I said something like, what you need is somebody who knows what the bloody real world looks like, because otherwise you're absolutely sunk. And he said, thank you, Rebecca. And I said, sorry? And he said, well, we were thinking of setting up a bit of a working group and we thought you might lead it. And I thought, bloody dropped myself in that, didn't I? So that was December 15, and I gave them from January 15 a day a week for 5 years. And so it's my voluntary work for HMRC. But as a result of that, I'm on the programme board, which is the ultimate steering group for MTD. So I tend to know a lot of what's going on behind the scenes, and I also obviously don't say it unless I'm told I can. But one of the things I did just over a year ago is I said to the policy guy, listen, you know, you guys are quite well worked up on the income tax side. What you have to get is that VAT is very, very different. Even down just to the first thing, which you all know, but you probably haven't thought about it this way, VAT is transactional. Income tax is about totals and net profit. And actually, it worries about if there's a pair of shoes in there that shouldn't be, but otherwise it's not that worried. VAT has to think about each and every single transaction. And I don't think in the idea that it's all what you do already, and yeah, you do it on a computer, so you'll be all right. What the team inside HMRC hadn't really got is that it's a very different animal indeed. So I started to talk about things on the screen. Partial exemption, capital goods scheme, even as simple as a second-hand car dealer. And I said, all of them, at the moment, don't have, unless they've had it written for them, don't have software that can produce the 9 boxes on their VAT return. They don't have it. And given that this isn't too far away, I don't think they're going to get it either. But you better talk to the software companies about what they're prepared to do in this fairly short window of 18 months, what they're prepared to do and what they can do to deliver that functionality. If you want people to file direct from software, you better bloody make sure there's some software they can use to do it. So we had a day at Dorset House, which is HMRC's IT hub in central London, or one of them, and it was quite interesting. So I nagged until they put it on. We got a load of vendors in. We got a load of pointy heads from HMRC down, mainly on the IT side, and I rocked up. And HMRC did quite a good thing about, you know, tell us what you need from us. And then I stood up and said, right, guys, you know, I'm going to assume you don't know a great deal about VAT apart from 20 and 5 and 0. So let's tell you what it is you're facing. And I started off with fuel scale charges. Until recently, how many basic brands of software would automatically do a fuel scale charge for you? And the answer to that is none. I mean, even now, you can't say, right, this is what I do about recovering VAT on fuel, and this is the CO2 of my car, put through the adjustment. Now, given that this is all about getting rid of errors, wouldn't that be a good thing? That would be a really good thing. Okay, so if they can't do fuel scale charges, then they probably can't do, and I started with partial exemption, explained how it worked, and they wrote, and one of the chaps was doing brain maps. And then I talked about capital goods schemes, and his brain maps got a bit more irate. Talked about second-hand car dealers, talked about tour operators. Actually, when I got to tour operators, he put his pen down. Because what HMRC was asking of them was absolutely quite ridiculous. And I said to HMRC, listen, when we do our day, bring with you, at least bring with you how many partially exempt businesses there are. But it'd be great if you could bring with you how many different margin schemes there are and how many traders there are on each and how many auctioneers there are. My estimate is less than 100 and so on. Because if I was Sage, for example, I would want to know how many times I can sell this before I spend 4 million quid developing it. That would be really quite important market-based information. And we rocked up and they said, we can't tell you how many partially exempt businesses there are because we haven't, because of the steaming VAT computer. Okay, it knows nothing. So, but what was very interesting is that for a lot of software companies now, their market is you guys. They've actually seen that with MTD, there's not a lot of point trying to sell direct to businesses when they can get the multiplier, and HMRC understand the multiplier, by selling through you. And if they can convince you their product is right for you, then you will get your clients onto that product. And that means, actually, that it's going to get easier. And lots of of software providers are writing partial exemption modules and margin scheme modules because most of you have got some. And most of you are going to end up saying, maybe not now, but in 4 or 5 years' time, well, this software isn't much good. It doesn't do partial exemption. So it will come, but it won't ever going to come in 18 months. So what has happened since about 14 months ago is that the guidance has backpedaled very hard and said, it's all right, you can do it on a spreadsheet. So I don't want you to be worried about complexity because it just isn't there. You're going to be doing largely what you do now, with the exception of using a keyboard to submit the VAT return. You'll be using a mouse. So really, it's not too bad. So let's have a little bit of a look. One of the things I just wanted to warn you about, and hopefully in your practice people have sort of got this now, is that charities can be VAT registered. Now, the issue with charities, and it's similar with corporation tax, is when they heard MTD, they also heard, it's okay, you're not going to have to do it. And they're still on, you don't have to do it. And they need to wake up. This is a tax-based migration, not a business-based migration. If you're a company, yes, corporation tax hasn't even been consulted on yet, but corporation tax isn't VAT. You do have to use VAT, and I'm still getting people going, oh, really? Crumbs. Now, I know HMRC haven't been that good at advertising and promoting this, and that's deliberate, and let me just tell you, it's done for this reason. HMRC took the view that if they started banging on about MTD back in the summer, there would be a certain amount of aggravation to both us and them of people going, well, what do I need to do? I don't know. Okay? And the answer to that was, nothing yet, we're not ready. So they kept quiet until now. And now the comms are building up. Okay. Let's get a bit technical for you. Right, notice 700/22. I'll say it lots. It's in my little handout. That is the notice that governs Making Tax Digital. And there were a couple of iterations of it. And in the end, HMRC decided, and I must say this was my view, they had loads of stuff in it about tax point and what is a sales invoice. And I went, that's nothing to do with MTD. That's just VAT. Just point them at the relevant notice. Make this one just about what's different for MTD. But one of the bits in there about who has to do it says only those businesses that have never exceeded the VAT threshold will be exempt from MTD. Let me say that again because it's a bit like, whoa. Only those businesses that have never exceeded the VAT threshold will be exempt from MTD. Well, that's a bit worrying because I've got clients who went over the VAT limit in, I don't know, the early 90s when it was down in 30,000, and they're still VAT registered, but they're nowhere near 85,000. But what you need to do, I mean, I understand that HMRC are going to reword that because certainly I didn't pick it up on a read through, and I should have. But basically, what they mean is this notice starts on the 1st of April 2019, and after that date, if you have never since that date exceeded the VAT threshold, you're exempt. And what they mean by that is once you go over, you're in. And you're in for good. Even if later your turnover drops, while you're still registered, you will still have to do MTD. You will not be able to regard yourself as voluntarily registered. So really that's a sort of you join the club and then you're stuck in it, really. Now, of course, there is a way out. You deregister. If you only registered because you had to, then the chances are you might want to deregister as soon as you can. If you deregister, you're not doing that, you know what it is. Okay. It does bring on, however, a process you will need in your firms. This is a new thing you have to do from April, okay? When you've got voluntarily registered guys, you don't need to track their value of their supplies. I'm using turnover and value of taxable supplies as the same. You guys know it isn't exactly the same, but if I can use turnover, it's easier to say. So you don't need to track their turnover because they're already registered, so it doesn't matter whether they go over the limit or not. From April 19, it will, because if they're voluntarily registered, they're still doing VAT 100 with keyboard. If they go over the limit, they're into MTD. So you will need to have a process which looks at these guys, which you don't do now because they're already registered, so you don't need to check. Now, on the slide, I put quarterly will be sufficient, and the reason for that is this. If you are over, let's take a June 19 quarter. So you weren't over in March 19, so you're not in on the 1st of April. You're not over in June 19, so you're not in on the 1st of July. You go over at the end of July 19. But you're not in for that quarter because it works on a quarter basis. So when you and I do the September return in late October possibly, you've spotted they went over in July, and therefore you know that the next return you do will be an MTD return. Doesn't matter you're already a month in by then, because it's the next return. Well, except they will need digital records. And obviously, if you've got clients who are voluntarily registered and you think they might go over, you need to talk to them about digital records. But as you're going to see in a minute, it's trivial. Really is trivial. Okay. So let's just run through VAT returns. They're exactly the same. They're still 9 boxes. You still do the same VAT periods, quarterly, monthly, annually. You'll submit your returns through software, you'll keep digital records, but everything else is the same. There's no, if I said the VAT rules are that thick in pieces of paper, all they've done is slap 2 sheets on the top. Nothing else has changed. Everything you do, the schemes you use, how you pay, all of that, and the penalties are the same. What I have heard HMRC say is that if clients do get in a tangle with their VAT next year, then they will be fairly sort of kind about penalties if the VAT's been paid. That in itself is a bit of a tricky one, because if you've done the returns so you know how much VAT there is, why haven't you submitted it? And if they're on direct debit, if I send them money and then submit the return late, I'm a bit worried they might take it again. So, but that's their line at the moment. Can I just say that anyone who's had the last 8 returns late and then claims the next one's late because they got muddled with MTD, there ain't going to be any sympathy for that one, okay? You know. So the notice talks about functional compatible software, okay? But what I want to really get for you now is that that isn't necessarily one piece of software. It's not necessarily all on one computer. So let's just talk about farmers. Farm plan, sorry, am I okay? Right, you're not quite getting me, right? I'll stay still now. Farm plan software for farmers. Now, there may be not many of you have got farmers in here, but farm plan is farm software. I understand from HMRC's site that farm plan are going to be developing a VAT submission tool, but quite a lot of accountants like to have farm plan where their clients raise all their sales invoices and things, but alongside it have another proprietary software brand. So let's say Sage, because they're not here today, so we'll give them some airtime. So you're running Sage for your client, and then the sales come in from Farm Plan. And what you do each quarter is you just journal the sales into Sage, and then you run the VAT return, and that works perfectly. Okay? Now, for the first year of MTD, that is absolutely compliant. That's compliant. You've got functional compatible software. All your sales are over here. All your purchases and other stuff are over here. Absolutely fine. The reason I say for the first year is that a manual journal entry, these are digital records, these are digital records. Once you've got digital records, you're not supposed to be on keyboards. So, but soft landing means an extra year. You will need a way of transferring that data into Sage, Xero, ClearBooks, whatever you're using. Yeah? You will need some way of doing that by IT with a mouse and not with a keyboard. But you've got a year. And what most of the guys are doing is developing a CSV import tool. So all the big guys are saying, yeah, okay, we know that you're a vet, you want to keep your invoices and everything on your vet practice software. So what we'll do is we'll allow you to squirt those into a CSV, import it into Xero, and run your VAT return like that. So multiple systems, absolutely fine. Using farm plan and you guys using a spreadsheet, no problem. Export CSV, bring into your spreadsheet software, absolutely fine. So once we're 12 months down the line, there'll be no copy and paste, no cut and paste, and no rekeying in 12 months' time. But until then, you can continue to use journals to move information between different types of digital record. A word on using proprietary branded software for clients. And let me just say here, my practice is very small and has very small clients. Every single one of my clients is going onto software. No argument. And if they want to argue, they can find another accountant. Okay? Now, almost none of my clients could use software if I gave them £1,000. But what we've done is we've looked at our client base, we've looked at how this is going to work for us, and we've inboarded all the bookkeeping, absolutely all of it. All my clients have to do is raise sales invoices in the software. That's all they have to do. And they can have as many visits from darling Liz, who's my daughter and my client contact person. They can have as many visits as they need from her, free of charge, to get them confident with raising sales invoices. That's all they have to do. Well, the other thing they have to do is connect their bank. And the way I'm doing it is, I've got one client I've had to do this to. If they don't connect their bank after 3 months, it's an extra £30 a month, which they will get a bill each month for £30 for every month they don't connect the bank, because the fees are agreed based on a live bank feed. And if you can't connect your bank, okay, having sent them the form to sign and send, then I'm going to charge you. For those clients who I've now got expense capture software, this is of the last week, okay? So I've decided it's an overhead to my practice. I'm not charging my clients. I've never run Vault Ledger for clients because they're all too small. I just take it straight off the bank. And then I thought about what we do and time we spend, and I decided, no, I'm going to invest the money in some expense capture software. So Receipt Bank is what I've gone for. Loads of other products are available. I've got clients who won't be able to photo invoices because they haven't got a mobile phone. Okay? So that's a bit of a non-starter. But that's all right, because I have little Junior. I do have, many of you will know, I have a very large family of willing and unwilling helpers. So my youngest daughter, who's studying part-time, she is client contact in that she will now, and with the pub I took on yesterday, she will be arranging to go and pick up their invoices, their purchase invoices for the month, each month. And the other thing I do is if Harriet rings you or Facebooks you or WhatsApps you or however you want to do it, you have it ready when she comes. If it isn't, it's 30 quid for a wasted visit. Haven't had to charge anyone. How many years have I spent with them saying, I'll bring it in, I'll bring it in, I'll get it to you early this year. Never, just doesn't happen. It's all imaginary. But I've not actually had to charge anyone for a monthly visit to pick up their paperwork, because that's all in the fee. And then she brings it back, and now we've got Receipt Bank. She will, because she has a mobile phone, she'll photo it all, upload it, magic. So, setting up your software. Make sure you understand all the VAT codes, or at least one person in your firm understands all the VAT codes and what the reverse charge service VAT codes are and all of that stuff, okay? And then, strong practical recommendation. Take off all the ones you don't want them to use. You can suppress them. Most software allows you to suppress VAT codes. Because clients, if your clients are doing their bookkeeping, it's all right for me because none of mine are. Clients will pick anything with a naught after it, irrespective of whether it's an EC sales naught or a reverse charge services naught. If it's got naught, it's probably right. Bank charges, that'll do. Okay, wages. So somebody needs to be on top of that. What do you have to have in the records? Well, if you're using software, this is not too difficult. The name of the business, the VAT number, the details of the VAT schemes, and the address of the principal place of business. If you're using spreadsheets, please put a tab on the spreadsheet with that on, okay? If necessary, make it an invisible one so the client can't delete it. What's anyone going to do if you don't? Well, pretty much nothing. But, you know, you might as well get it right. This is an easy bit to get right. We'll get the easy bits right. Right. Sales. Each sale, each supply, date, value of supply, rate of VAT. That's it. You don't need the customer name. You don't need the invoice number, but you've got all of those. What I want to highlight for you is this is a subset of what you've already got. Whether you've got a spreadsheet, whether you've got fancy software, this is a subset of what you've already got. So you're there. Unless you've got clients, as I have, who still write their invoices in a duplicate book. Okay? But when I go and see him, in about 2 weeks' time, he's going to go onto software and raise his invoices on software. And given he only raises 12 a year, if he really can't cope, he can ring Liz and she'll do them for him. So, retailers, daily takings, not weekly. Now, another practical tip that we've done is that we've got a number of pubs and a cafe, okay? And do you know what we are? We take all comers, don't we? They give us a load of different rubbish. And we just do it because that's what we do. And I must admit, I got to a point where I had I still got no thumbnail. That's a retailer who does his Zeds every day, rolls them up nice and small, puts 3 staples in the middle, puts them in an envelope, sellotapes it down for the week, and then sends them to me to do the VAT. No thumbnails. We had to do it two-handed. We had to sit there, and I'd pick the things out and then go, right, okay. So we've got a daily taking sheet for all retailers. It's exactly the same. And they're not allowed to have their little book or their little system. If they're coming to me, they get, so our chap we picked up yesterday, today he will get November and December takings books. Okay, we print it off, we bind it up, it's got the name of the pub on the front, November daily takings. All he does is cashes up and writes it in there, and they're all laid out exactly the same for every retailer. Then, when she picks up November, she'll drop off January. Okay, so that's going to work. And then, inputting those takings is much quicker because everybody's is laid out exactly the same, so it's really, really quick. Oh, I'm using a keyboard. Yes, because I'm creating a digital record. So keyboards are fine when you're creating that digital record. You probably have to. But after that is when you have to step away from the keyboard. I've got to stop in just a minute. Let's just do supplies received. So purchases, cash basis. One little tip for you. If a client pays 3 invoices on one payment, you should really have 3 records. I never have, but now I will by using Receipt Bank. So as the payment comes through, it's going to match in my software, or other products are available. And then finally, okay, once you're doing the return, you know that partial exemption and margin scheme calculations aren't in the software. But what do? You do them on the back of an envelope, if you like, as long as you keep the envelope. You do them on another spreadsheet. You input those figures using a keyboard. Okay, they're not part, and never will be, of the digital requirement. You have to do that manually and input that as an adjustment. So what I think you can see is that once you've got all of the raw data, you will still do exactly what you do now, which is work out the margins in a stock book, if you like. Do that and then input that data and then submit it. Whether it's a spreadsheet, whether it's software, it's all exactly the same. Okay, final roundup tips. And I've not had any questions, but we've got 10 minutes for questions now. Final roundup tips. Jot down icaw.com/MTD. That is the ICAW's MTD hub, which is open to the world and free. There is tons of good stuff on there. Now, some of it you can't get because it's for members of the tax faculty. But for example, there are client letters on there for you to write to clients. 3-word downloadable letters, non-VAT registered, mandated, non-mandated VAT registered clients. So there's tons of stuff on there that's really useful. There's also the list of software if you don't want to get it off HMRC, and that's being added to all the time. So somebody's worked hard to do that. Have it, everybody, because it's really, really useful. And otherwise, join the pilot. Get your agent services account. Join up your new computer, old computer. Old sign-ons, new sign-on. How does this one know where your clients are? It doesn't. But you can then say, hold on, over on that system, this is the sign-on I use. Some firms have got 40. So you actually pipe the two together, and then when you're on the MTD machine, you'll be able to bring over your clients for MTD. They can sign up, but HMRC believes that you'll want to sign them up because you'll know when you're ready. Do get in the pilot. All of my VAT registered clients will be in the pilot before the end of March. All of them, whether mandated or not. Because I'm not having 2 systems in my office. I'm having 1 system. And everybody's going to do it, whether they like it or not. Okay, so let's see who's got questions.
Yep. And if you've got any questions, if you put your hand up, Abby is roving the room with a microphone, and Anna over there. So we have 2 people with microphones. So if you wait for them to arrive so everyone can hear the question. Do I have a starter for 5 for Rebecca?
Gentleman at the back.
Did I misread the Accounting Web podcast that people on the annual VAT scheme wouldn't have to do MTD? Did I misunderstand that?
They will have to do MTD if they are over the VAT limit. So it's as simple as that. If you're over the VAT limit, you're in, but you'll still be doing it annually. You won't be doing it quarterly because you'll do what you've always done.
Can I just confirm about the taking sheets? Do you still need to save the Z readings, though, don't you, for confirmation?
You'll need them so that if you have an inquiry, but what I've said to my pub clients is stick them in a box. And don't worry if they're not in order. If you have an inquiry, someone can sit and work out which ones are which day. Yeah,
Okay, I guess.
there, and then there's
that
another
one's
one there.
I got clients, I need to submit EC sales needs and interest debt. Are they still the same?
They are the same, so EC sales, Intrastat, all manual, absolutely fine until we stop doing it, yeah. It's simply VAT returns that are going into MTD. Nothing else related is going to be moved over.
I think there's one over here.
If that
There's
one
one way
comes
over there.
We'll take that one, and then this gentleman. Yeah.
You said about the HMRC and sort of like the fact they've held off with the publications and everything on it. Do you think they're really going to sort of amp that up a bit now? Because I think that's one of the biggest struggles is the clients kind of don't believe it's going to happen because they've not seen anything on it yet.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Funnily enough, my daughter, who, as I said, works as a pub for her social life, she said she was chatting to someone the other night, and this person said, oh, and there's a new thing coming in April. And she said, oh, yeah, that'd be MTD, which they were extremely surprised at because they didn't expect the bar girl to know about MTD. What HMRC have said is they will write to all VAT registered traders they'll write to everyone who's mandated. They may not write to everyone, but they will certainly write to everyone who's mandated, telling them what they need to do. Obviously, I said they held off for that reason. They also are going to put in there, if you have an accountant or advisor, please speak to them, because what they don't want is our clients rushing out and signing up to MTD when we're not ready to do it. So they've been quite respectful of that relationship. I mean, lots of people are worried that HMRC are trying to ease us out with this. Absolutely not. They desperately need us. So we are still front and centre, and they're trying to think of ways that it will be inclusive. Gentleman here.
I've got a client that's on the flat rate scheme, and they're
Yep.
using QuickBooks Online.
Yep.
When you try and submit the VAT return, it says you can't do this using the software. You have to go to the HMRC portal. Is that something HMRC are A, aware of, and B, going to action?
I'm sure they are aware of it, and I'm sure Intuit are aware of it, and they better get it. So I hadn't realised I haven't got anyone on flat rate. I'm sure Intuit are working on that very, very quickly, because and what I do is speak to your customer rep at Intuit and say, I want to get these guys on the pilot. Will you tell me when is an ETA for flat rate filing direct? Yeah.
Anyone on this half the room? So, any others? No. Here's one.
Gentleman over there.
Abby's on her way.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, you mentioned having to register once you go over the turnover for the you're on it, that's it,
Yeah.
from then on. What happens if you have a client that, for instance, one quarter has got a 25 grand turnover,
Yeah.
so that would be average at 100 for the year, but then the following 3 quarters is only, say, 10 grand turnover, so they're actually under it for the year, but not for that particular first quarter.
What you'll need to do is do the VAT. Unfortunately, you'll have to do the month end and do the last 12 months. Now, if they go over, there is a facility to ask not to register on the basis that that was a blip. And if you are not registered and you ask not to register, you'll be all right. Unfortunately, if you're voluntarily registered and you have a blip, you're in, mate, and you're going to stay in. Yeah. It is unfortunate, but honestly, what I hope I've conveyed is that this isn't scary, and that actually it isn't a lot different. And in a year's time, I expect we'll all be doing it for all our VAT registered clients, because it's easier than having 2 systems. Yeah.
Any other? Here's one over here.
Hi. Let's say if I'm using a bridging software to submit a return, but you said this is digital record keeping, so I'm not sure what's the requirement. I mean, is the HMRC going to check let's say if they have any...
Digital record keeping is a requirement of MTD, but digital record keeping can include spreadsheets. So you could be using effectively a cash book, each transaction on one line. You need the date, you need the value, you need the VAT that you intend to recover. So you'd need that for the accounts.
Yeah.
On the sales side, you'll need the date, you'll need the value, and you'll need the rate of VAT. But again, that will be there because you need that for the accounts. So it's as low as 1 line per spreadsheet, on a spreadsheet, will meet the digital record keeping requirements. If you're then going to submit from that spreadsheet using bridging software, you will need to use relative cell referencing to actually pick up your totals. And that's it. So if you're using software, then obviously at least some of your records are in the software. You need to think about purchases and sales, and have you got a 1 line record for each of those?
Okay. And what about the taking pictures of all those receipts? What's the purpose?
Don't have to. Don't need to. No, not a requirement. Never will be. I just think it's the way the world's going. And for me, the less time my staff, kids, have to spend on a keyboard, the happier they are. And the more they start thinking about my clients' businesses and how they can support them and become advisors rather than bookkeepers. So that's the way I'm going in my practices. Complete change. I'm not really calling myself an accountant now. I'm calling myself a business advisor.